Hey everyone, I finished watching the next VR Troopers episode, The Virtual Spy. It's a decent episode. Starts off, Ryan is training in virtual reality, and interesting thing, it's not the fictional technobabble version of virtual reality that VR Troopers usually uses. It's actually the correct terminology. It is just it's Metalder footage, but it does fit like what VR actually is, which is really weird for VR Troopers to actually use the term VR properly. Strange. Anyway, moving on. Carl Zichter has a new plan, and as Grimlord, he talks to Icebot and Ivar that he wants a soldier who can infiltrate and befriend the troopers, and he can gain their trust and give him back their information. So they show him this minion who can transform into a very early 90s looking teen dude. Very early 90s looking. He has a mullet and everything. It's kind of funny, and it's one of those weird things that dates this already kind of. Actually, VR Troopers was dated when it came out. The footage is from the 80s. Anyway, uh, let's see. This the disguised minion picks the name Jeremy and gets a job at the newspaper. He becomes friends with Caitlin, and let's see. Him, Caitlin, JB, and Ryan are at a picnic, and he raises some suspicion when he gets really mad and disgusted at Jeb for no reason, really. I don't really know why exactly he gets so mad at Jeb, and it doesn't really come up again. He doesn't have, like, anger issues. I mean, he is a evil monster, but moving on. Let's see. Carl Zichter is watching this through a screen, and he orders a bunch of disguised skugs that are around them to attack. And that made me think about why exactly did he need a transforming monster to turn into a human when the skugs can do that just any time? I don't know. All I can guess is maybe the Skugs aren't smart. Maybe they can't like go off on their own for too long or something like a monster could. Uh, just a thought, whatever. So they fight off the Skugs, and Jeremy helps them fight off the Skugs, and the troopers are really impressed with his skills. So they take him to Tao Dojo to meet Tao and show him what he can do. So Jeremy performs a kata for Tao, and Tao says, "I don't recognize the style. Where'd you learn it?" And Jeremy's like, "Oh, I picked it up on my own." And they're like, "I don't know if that's right." So they're all getting a little bit suspicious, but it's not too weird yet. And then, let's see, he overhears JB discussing money matters with Tao, and JB mentions like a complicated equation that would end in a percent, and Jeremy just knows it off the top of his head. And they're like, huh? And Jeremy's like, oh, and then just kind of leaves, and they're like, huh, that's weird. And that starts to build up more suspicion, but Caitlin's still pretty trusting of him, but the others are starting to be like, I don't know, he's kind of weird. So then Jeremy goes back to Carl Zichter and reveals that he's gotten info from the troopers. Earlier, he touched a disc inside JB's backpack. And it's really cool because in the scene, it kind of looks like at first he's about to steal something out of the backpack, then JB turns and he like moves his hand away. But then here it turns out he didn't actually need to steal anything, he just needs to touch the disc inside the thing, and he can absorb all the information. And he holds up his hand to Grimlord, and you can see a bunch of technical data going across his hand. It's a really cool and visually interesting scene. I thought about using that for the image that I use for the thumbnail for this, but I couldn't really think of any way to make that look particularly interesting as a still image. It really works better when it's moving and you can tell that it's like a computer readout on his hand. So I picked a different scene, but it was a cool scene in the show and it was a neat effect. So then, at the newspaper later, Jeremy tells Caitlin that he's investigating the VR troopers and he thinks he knows where the entrance to their base is. And Caitlin tries to play it cool, but she's starting to get nervous about this. So then he leaves and she looks up some information on Jeremy but can't find anything. And then, while she's doing that, Jeremy hacks into Hart's lab with the file info that he has now. He traps JB and Caitlin inside the lab. Caitlin went down to the lab in between her looking him up and him hacking the lab. I'm trying to remember. I think I might have. Whatever. Moving on. Let's see. Her and JB are trapped in the lab. and then Ryan tries to enter the lab, but he's sent into the battle grid. So Ryan fights his way out of the battle grid and encounters Grimlord's monster, and he recognizes its voice. It's Jeremy. So then they get into a fight. JB and Caitlin are inside the lab trying to figure out a way to escape, and they find out that Jeremy activated a self-destruct on the lab, which they overcome in, like, less than a minute. It's kind of weird. I don't know why exactly they needed to add the self-destruct thing, because it's resolved so quickly, and then immediately after they get out. And I don't even know why they needed to get out, because they don't go to help Ryan. They get in the airship, and we just have some stock footage of the airship fighting some, like, other things. So then, oh yeah, in the fight scene with Jeremy, Ryan takes a dart to the ankle, and so then he calls the turbo cycle, and, like, I thought the dart to the ankle was gonna have some, like, lasting impact, but it doesn't. He's, like, instantly recovered after just being off his foot for a few seconds. So then he defeats Jeremy, and yeah, we never learn what the monster's real name is. It's always just Jeremy, which makes me wonder, is his name actually Jeremy? Grimlord has all these monsters, Decimator and Tankatron, and this one's Jeremy. So then at the newspaper, Woody's complaining to Caitlin that Jeremy disappeared and never gave him the VR Troopers article he was working on. They all laugh about it, and then that's it. It's a decent episode. It's nothing particularly amazing, but it works. Grimlord's plan makes sense, and he actually attempts some strategy. And like I said before, I don't know why he didn't just use the Skugs. I guess the Skugs aren't adept at pulling off a scheme like this. And I was thinking back, we don't really see the Skugs interact with people very often. Like, the closest is those women in black that Grimlord has. And even then, yeah, they don't really pass well for human. So, I don't know, maybe he figured the monster would be able to pass for human better? Moving on. Let's see. One of the interesting things is there's no mystery with Jeremy. The audience knows who Jeremy really is from the very beginning, but it's the VR Troopers to whom that's a mystery. And so the, like, flow of the episode is us seeing the VR Troopers and, like, how they figure it out. And it's really interesting because it parallels the Thunder Ranger story that I was watching in Ninja Steel at the same time, Ninja Storm. In Ninja Storm, the Thunder Rangers introduction is kind of similar to Jeremy, where the audience knows who they are, what their deal is, but it's the heroes who are left in the dark and they don't know, and it's them who have to figure it out. However, in VR Troopers, we actually do see the Rangers, like, putting together clues and slowly figuring out that Jeremy isn't a normal person, that he's actually a monster. And there is just kind of a reveal at the end, and Ryan is surprised, but it's far worse in Thunder Rangers in Ninja Storm because, like, so much information is given to the audience, it becomes so obvious that who the Thunder Rangers are, and then they just reveal themselves to the Rangers for no reason. And it just felt like the writers, like, they had spent so much time keeping it a secret so it wouldn't be obvious to the Rangers, but then feeding so many clues to the audience, they kind of lost focus of the story, and they're like, oh, they need to know who these guys are, so they just have them demorph in front of them, and they're like, oh, it's you guys! Yeah, it's us, and okay, whatever. And now they're back in the episodes that I'm watching, and they're evil again, and I'll get to that in the Ninja Storm video. So yeah, I think VR Troopers kind of handled this kind of plot a lot better, although the goals of the episodes were far different. In VR Troopers, this plot is used to just introduce and destroy the monster of the week. He's just a one-off character. He's not going to be a main recurring thing. However, in Ninja Storm, the Thunder Rangers are major recurring characters, and they wanted to have some kind of big setup and introduction for them. And, let's see. Oh yeah, the self-destruct thing at the lab is really weak, and it made me wonder, was the episode just running short by a few seconds or something, and that's why they added in the whole thing with the self-destruct at the lab, and then the troopers immediately escape, and then they're in the airship, and they just kind of kill some time until Ryan defeats Jeremy and the episode's over with. Whatever. Anyway, that's it for the VR Trooper episode, The Virtual Spy. It's an okay episode. It's pretty average. It's very early 90s. It's got a charm to it, though, and, like, the plot is decent, I guess. Yeah, it's just an unimpressive episode, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It's perfectly fine. So that's it for this one. Hope you enjoyed it. See ya.